Can a rural mining town be the fastest growing city in Washington state? Cue the intro.
Throughout history, a select few places have experienced massive population growth in a remarkably short amount of time. These are the boomtowns.
Individuals with vision and guts put it all on the line to build infrastructure and a better way of life for these communities, changing the local economy and history forever. We are on a mission to find the next boomtowns across America. Located an hour outside of Seattle in the shadow of Mount Rainier lies the city of Black Diamond, a former coal mining town that is one of the fastest growing places in the state of Washington. There are no tourist attractions in Black Diamond. In fact, there isn't even a grocery store. To better understand the explosive growth in this most unusual place, let's start by diving into its past. Hunter, what do you have for us this week?
Thank you, Austin. I am super excited to talk about this because this is kind of in my neck of the woods. I live in the greater Seattle area, and Black Diamond is in the greater Seattle area. So this is going to be fun. So let's dive into that history. The area that we now call Black Diamond, which is east of the Puget Sound and nestled in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains, it was originally inhabited by the Coast Salish people. That's the indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest coast. And they had a smokehouse here where they would catch fish in the nearby lake and they would smoke them. And it wasn't until the 1880s that coal was discovered in this area. Prior to that, there wasn't really a whole lot of engagement in the area from Europeans and Americans. But once coal was discovered, all that changed. There was a California coal mining company called the Black Diamond Coal Mining Company that sent a crew north into the Washington Territory to homestead the area and begin setting up operations for coal mining. A railroad was also built to support the industry, and by 1884, the first mine was opened. Workers and their families were moved up from California by the company, and the town of Black Diamond was born. Black Diamond was a company town, and what that means is the mining company owned pretty much everything. Families could buy their own houses. However, the mining company actually owned the land that the houses stood on. And there's a reason I'm bringing that up that I'll get into in a bit. There was also a company store, kind of like a general store, where workers could buy goods, and instead of paying for it, they would actually get a deduction from their paycheck. So this whole kind of like town operation thing, it was all controlled by the mining company. And even like the foreman of the mining company was basically the mayor of the town. Is very interesting, something we don't really see much of today. By the turn of the century, nearly 3,500 people lived in Black Diamond, which was pretty substantial. Then just a few years, it went from not even existing to 3,500 people. And in 1907, the miners unionized. Okay, they joined the United Mine Workers of America. Flash forward a few years to World War I, the war created a huge demand for coal, and with it came increased wages for the miners. However, after the war ended, the company wanted the miners to go back to their old wages before the war. As you can imagine, this did not go over well. The miners were outraged. The most vocal miners were just fired. And in 1921, the remaining workers went on strike. So what did the company do? They brought in non-union workers to replace them, which inevitably made the situation even worse. The company had to set up barbed wire around the mines to protect the replacement workers from the strikers. They hired 35 guards to patrol the town. And even with these measures, the non-union workers were verbally and sometimes physically assaulted on a regular basis. So Black Diamond kind of became a little war zone for a while. Now, remember a few minutes ago, I mentioned how the miners could buy the home from the mining companies, but the mining companies still owned the land that the homes stood on. Well, the company gave the striking workers an ultimatum. They said, you can either sell your home or you can move it, but you're getting off our land. It was basically their way of saying, get out of town. We don't want you here. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Most workers and their families were forced to leave to seek new employment, and those who tried to regain employment with the company were blacklisted. They were done. The mine remained non-union for another 10 years until President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal politics allowed Black Diamond to reestablish a mining union. But unfortunately, it was too late. Oil had replaced coal as the primary fuel source in the nation, And by the end of the 1930s, the mines were permanently closed. The company liquidated all its assets and the town was disbanded. It was just, they just up and left. A few people did remain because they just decided it was a great place to live and raise a family. So in 1958, the city of Black Diamond was officially incorporated. Black Diamond was just a rural community after the coal mining company left, and it stayed fairly rural even today. But the suburbs of Seattle are just swallowing up this old mining town at an unprecedented rate, which we're going to get into the stats here in a second. But Austin, before we begin, I just wanted to point out that what I find so interesting about this history is with the coal mining operation pulling out, it's amazing that the town didn't just die. There is another mining town that existed just east of Black Diamond called Franklin, Washington. And if you go there today, it is a ghost town. And when I say ghost town, I don't mean like a touristy ghost town in Wyoming that you can go take pictures at. I mean, there's literally just old foundations that are completely overgrown. That is it. The town is completely dead and no one goes there. So it's amazing to me that Black Diamond kind of withstood the test of time. Not only did it survive potentially becoming a ghost town, but now we're seeing it just blow the heck up. Any thoughts on that from you, Austin?
Yeah, that's amazing. The history, and sad in some capacities, of course, but those things happened back then as well. I know the Pacific Northwest, it was all like fishing, fur trapping, lumber, and raw materials like coal. Makes total sense. Yeah, having driven through, it surprises me as well that it hadn't died, because it's like you said, it was probably very much on the verge for quite a long time, and people just made it work. And well, if they actually do own those houses, they're worth a lot more now. So we will get into
Yep.
kind of what the place looks like as of today. So as of today, there are 5,400 people who live in Black Diamond, and the population has grown by 20.24%, which brings it in the top 10 fastest growing towns in the entire nation. So wait until the end of the episode, because I've done a projection on what it will look like for 2023. Still pretty exceptional. Now, in terms of age demographics, it's about the national average, but this, and we'll get into this more, but this is kind of a bedroom community for Seattle and people who work in Seattle. So it is safe to assume that there's kind of two major demographics, or maybe three. There's people who've been there for a long time, and then there's families, young to middle-aged families, who are moving there, buying bigger houses, raising their families there. And then there are also young remote workers, I would say, if I had to bucket it into those things. Racially speaking, it's 82% Caucasian, 10.2% Hispanic, 3.6% Asian, 2.2% Native American, and 0.2% African American. So for the state of Washington, actually relatively diverse. And that probably has to do with the fact that the location is particularly unique in that it is not super far from Seattle, but it is pretty far from Seattle. It is close to farming communities. So the farming work and revenue is one thing. And then also it's relatively close to a Native American reservation. So there's a blend of a bunch of different cultures there. And on the political spectrum, the county that Black Diamond is in is called King County, and King County is very liberal. Like on the spectrum of liberal to conservative, it's actually off the charts to the left. Like the chart can't hold it. And so what's interesting about Black Diamond is actually a bit less liberal than that. So it's actually on the chart. And that's probably has to do, again, with the cultural diversity there and the different employment opportunities that existed in the past. But to put this into perspective, 75% of people in King County voted Democrat, 22% voted Republican. And so I anticipate that Black Diamond will probably long-term end up leaning more liberal than it is today. And that's just has to do with demographic shifts. So we can get into that a little bit as well. But those are just the general stats. And as you know, on the podcast, we go through three major sections. Would you visit there? Would you move there? And would you invest there? So let's jump straight into the visiting section, because there are some interesting things here. As you mentioned, Hunter, Black Diamond is not known as a tourist destination, unlike many of the other places that we've talked about earlier in this podcast season. So Black Diamond isn't really high on the tourism charts, but compared to other towns that we've discussed, it has different seasonality. So in the case of Black Diamond, it's quite close to Mount Rainier in Washington. So the hiking is fantastic in the summer. So the streets get busy in the summer, a lot of car traffic. Not necessarily that people are staying in Black Diamond, but they're going through Black Diamond. They're grabbing coffee. They might eat in Black Diamond. They might go to trails near Black Diamond. So the summer is busy. The spring and fall are quite slow. And then the winter, with snowshoeing and hiking and skiing in the area, cross country skiing, that area kind of picks up in the winter again. So a few top things to do in the area. Number one is checking out Flaming Geyser State Park. So this is a really cool state park. It's not just a forest you walk around in. It is technically a forest, but underneath, 1,000 feet below that forest, is a natural methane pocket that has been there for a long, long time. And people started noticing back in the early 1900s that there were bubbles bubbling out of the mud, and some innovative individual decided to put a lighter to it, basically, and it caught fire. Don't ask me how someone thought to do that. They're like, it could have gone super bad. But that flame is still alive today. So that's what's crazy, is the methane flow is so fast that literally you can go there and look at this teeny little flame. And Hunter, have you been there? Can you speak to that at all?
I haven't, which is a bummer because I live exceptionally close to it. There's a lot of state parks in the Black Diamond area, and that one is next on my list. I've seen pictures though, so the flame that you're talking about, yeah, I know exactly what you mean there. And yeah, it looks like to your point, there's a Zippo lighter under the ground, and just the flame is popping out. Yeah. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, don't go there expecting 100-foot column of flame coming out of the ground, just to be clear. It's like a candle.
No.
But all right, so some other stuff to do in the area is the Black Diamond Museum. So that museum essentially has two major things. It has the coal town history, and then it has the railroad history, because the trains used to go in there to get the coal and transport it, and so it has some coal history. And finally, it's worth a walk at nearby Lake Sawyer. They have a ton of nature trails, and I'll actually get into it a little bit later, but there are some cool places to stay there as well. So in terms of restaurants, if you're looking for a nice sit-down spot, check out Europa. So this is a German restaurant, and it gets rated extremely well. And part of my family is of German heritage, and German food can be a little bit bland depending on what it is, but like good German food is pretty hard to find, and this gets rated super well. Another great spot is the Black Diamond Bakery. So they're really known for their breakfast, kind of a diner food vibe. The atmosphere is not dinery, but it kind of has a diner food vibe. But they also make a bunch of fresh baked treats, so that's always nice to have. And then finally, coffee. So the Pacific Northwest is known for their coffee, and Black Diamond has a number of coffee spots. A lot of them are new, which I think has to do with the population migration to Black Diamond, which we'll get into. Some awesome coffee spots include Black Gold Coffee Company or Roast Republic. Both of them get rated very highly, and they have nummy pictures of caramel macchiatos and other delicious things, so you should definitely check it out. And in terms of places to stay, Black Diamond is a bit limited on hotels, to be honest. There are towns around Black Diamond that are bigger where you can get a hotel. There's Best Westerns or Marriott's or whatever. But Black Diamond itself doesn't really have great options. So what you're going to want to look for is bed and breakfast or short-term rentals like an Airbnb or VRBO. So a few suggestions for you would be Linda's by the Lake. That's in Maple Valley, which is the town pretty much just north of Black Diamond, kind of northwest of Black Diamond. And Linda's by the Lake is this really quintessential bed and breakfast. It's absolutely beautiful. And so that's just a nice place to stay, and you'd probably be 5 minutes from Black Diamond. The other two places I want to mention are both short-term rentals. I found a really quaint cabin that's in the middle of the woods, and this woods is very Pacific Northwest, deep green, mossy woods, very stereotypical. It's awesome. And this cabin is quite affordable, and it has its own family movie room with a projector screen. So if you were a group and you wanted somewhere affordable to stay, that's an option. And then the other place is a two-story lake house, which is on Lake Sawyer that I mentioned earlier. And it's just a beautiful lake. You can kayak and canoe, and this house has 5 bedrooms, so it would be great for a large family. So yeah, Hunter, you've driven through Black Diamond, you've toured around a little bit. What are your thoughts on the visiting part of Black Diamond?
Yeah, I think you alluded earlier to the fact that if you drive through the main street, there's not a whole lot to look at. There's a few older houses right off the road, and they have a pretty big school, but that's about it. Like, it's not like you're driving through like some cool old historic downtown like we have a lot out here in the West. It just kind of is what it is. But what's funny, you mentioned the all the coffee stands they're putting in because of that demand from the Seattleites, and it's so true. It's like you're driving and it's like super boring, and then it's like coffee stand, coffee stand, coffee stand, coffee stand.
Yeah. How many
Yeah,
coffee
it's
stands does a town need?
exactly, exactly. And I was also going to mention that we said earlier that there's not a grocery store. There's quite a few. Quite, how do I say this? There are very few amenities in the town of Black Diamond itself. However, Maple Valley, like you said, is like 5 minutes north. So if you go just 5 minutes out of Black Diamond, you got a grocery store, you got Burger King, McDonald's, all the fast food chains. So the amenities are close. It's not like if you're visiting Black Diamond, there's absolutely nothing for 2 hours around you. You know what I'm saying?
Totally. Totally. And I think we'll get into that in the move section as well. Like, why is Black Diamond growing like crazy if no one wants to go there for tourism, essentially? And I do want to mention that although Black Diamond, again, it's not branded as a tourism oriented town necessarily. People aren't really probably Googling, I want to go to Black Diamond to visit for tourism. But again, Mount Rainier is a huge deal. And there's beautiful rivers around there. And so it is not that you couldn't go to Black Diamond or even stay in Black Diamond if you wanted that to be your base for your hiking trip or your family camping trip or whatever. It's totally doable. It's just not really
They
branded
also
that way
have it.
because okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah. In addition to hiking, there's also a big dirt biking trail in Black Diamond that I know some guys that go dirt biking there. It's quite popular.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I grew up doing that
Yeah.
stuff. I love that. All right. So the next section is all about moving to Black Diamond. And I think this will be the most interesting for everybody listening here. So let's talk about the general demographics in the area. 63% of the residents of Black Diamond are married. That's exceptionally high. 40% are married with children. That's way above the national average. So this is a great spot for families. I mean, we'll get into this more, but this is the reason you would go to Black Diamond is to move to Black Diamond and raise a family, essentially. And so home prices grew 10.6% this year. I actually think that that will continue for quite a long time because the demand is far outpacing the supply there. And as Hunter, you can speak to in just a bit as well, they're building as fast as they can in Black Diamond, but you can only build so fast. And so there's just no supply, and it's just not going to be for quite some time. The median home price is $741,000, which for some folks sounds like a crazy amount of money, but when a 3-bedroom apartment in Seattle is 1.4 million, 741,000 for a 4-bedroom house sounds pretty awesome. So it really is the perspective. Again, the ideal customer, the customer who's moving to Black Diamond, is the person who doesn't have the $1 million, or if they have the $1 million, they don't want an apartment. They want a house with a yard, and that's what Black Diamond is really offering. The median income of Black Diamond is $32,000 a year, and the median household income is $67,000 a year. So that's about at the national average, and that includes a blend of retired folks plus the new people moving in, singles moving in, etc. And so that's not super surprising. Now let's talk about the schools for a second though, because this is interesting. Again, I can't stress enough, Black Diamond's population is actually getting larger, but it's a really small town. And so they went from having one super small elementary school which was rated 4 out of 10, to building a large second elementary school, which is rated 7 out of 10. They have no middle school, they have no high school. So all the kids that go to the elementary schools in Black Diamond transfer to Maple Valley for middle school and high school. So that is something to bear in mind. Again, if you were on a school bus, the kids wouldn't even know the difference. It feels like you're basically in the same town. It's just my house is like 10 minutes that way and I go to high school over here or something. So it's not a big deal. But just to bear in mind, there's no infrastructure in Black Diamond because the population growth hadn't happened until very recently. And that high school in Maple Valley, by the way, is a 9 out of 10. So the ratings are exceptionally. In terms of taxes, Washington State is ranked 15th. One being the best, the 50th state being the worst. They're ranked 15th. Washington has no income tax, which Hunter and I can both attest to. No income tax is awesome. Big fan of no income tax. But they do have, to compensate for that, they do have higher property taxes. They have relatively high sales tax. And the state of Washington actually has an e-commerce tax that not a lot of people know about. Every single e-commerce transaction you do, if you ship to your address in Washington, you will get an extra tax added to it because it's such a big employer in the state of Washington. In terms of employers, this is where Black Diamond starts to make a lot of sense. People moving to Black Diamond likely work in or near the Seattle area, which is a big sprawling area, by the way. It's not like just one block. There's many towns around Seattle in which these companies are headquartered, but we're talking Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, Boeing, T-Mobile, a bunch of other huge employers, and Facebook even has a location in Seattle. So, the job market's huge, and this is really a place where people are moving there because the quality of life might be higher for them, or home affordability is kind of forcing them to go to that area. And it's also at the base of Mount Rainier. It's absolutely beautiful, hikes, rivers. So you have that going for you. We've talked about the proximity to Seattle, but I don't think we laid it down specifically. With perfect traffic, which anybody who's lived near Seattle or any major West Coast city or any major city in general will laugh at when you say perfect traffic next to a big city's name. But with perfect traffic, it's a 1-hour commute from Black Diamond to Seattle. Realistically, during rush hour, 1.5 to 2 hours. So, and that's each way. So it's considerable, but again, with home price affordability, it is worth it for those folks. So Hunter, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts about living in the area and moving there, raising a family?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts. So first off, Black Diamond, it still feels very rural, even with the huge amount of growth that they've had. If you're just driving through, there's some farms, older buildings, the pace of life seems slower. But what's interesting is if you go one or two streets off of that main road, it's just suburbia. I mean, they are building houses left and right. They just put in a huge, like, planned community. God, I don't even know how many houses, hundreds maybe. I mean, just ridiculous. And if you look at like Google Maps at Black Diamond and zoom out so you can see the Seattle area, I mean, it is literally closing in on Black Diamond. It's surrounding it. And what I believe has happened is the inevitable has happened. You had this rural community fairly close to the big city. The big city is just pushing out suburbs like crazy, and the suburbs have caught up with the rural community and is kind of just taking over. So it in that way, it is very much so a bedroom community. Another thing I wanted to point out, not just about Black Diamond specifically, but the Seattle area as a whole, and really the whole western side of Washington, it rains a lot. That's not just a stereotype. It is cloudy or rainy like 9 months out of the year, which to some people is a really big deal. I am probably of the minority in that I love cloudy days. I love rain. I don't really like hot sunny weather. Austin, I'm sure you're the exact opposite of that. But it does rain a lot. It's very cloudy. It's overcast. Some people, I shouldn't say some people, a lot of people get seasonal affective disorder, SAD. And I remember I've worked with guys in the past that would have like the ultraviolet light thing on their desk to like, kind of emulate the sunshine. So that's a real thing here. That's something to be aware of. If you love warm, sunny weather, Washington is probably not the best place for you. But if you can tolerate it, or if you even like it, it's awesome. Another thing I wanted to bring up about Black Diamond, and again the Seattle area as a whole, is the culture. We talk about this all the time on Boomtowns. If you're going to move somewhere, you really want to make sure that you're going to fit into that culture. Otherwise, you could have some serious issues down the road. And there is a social phenomena known in the Seattle area. It's called the Seattle Freeze. And if you're not familiar with the Seattle Freeze, it's basically that it is exceptionally difficult to make friends in the Seattle area. And not only is making friends difficult, but people tend to be, I think, Austin, you and I talked about this earlier. People are very
Hmm.
cordial in the Seattle area, not necessarily friendly. They're not mean or aggressive by any means, but they're cordial. They keep to themselves. People tend to be very busy. So if you are passing people on the street, they may nod, they may say hello. More times than not, they just keep their heads down and keep walking. It's difficult if you're from outside of the area and you're moving here. It's difficult to meet new people. I have found the best way to do so is to just get involved in something, whether that be your work, hanging out with coworkers outside of work, or maybe getting involved in a church or a gym. Or in my case, I meet people when I'm walking my dog, other dog lovers out there. But yeah, it's a strange phenomena that's very hard to overcome. There's a lot of introverts, I think, in the Northwest is maybe part of that. I know there's also a lot of Scandinavian heritage, and people from Scandinavia tend to be kind of quiet and keep to themselves. But Austin, you've spent a lot of time in the Northwest and in the Seattle area, so I'm curious if you
Hmm.
have anything to add to that.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I was just thinking. So I have lived in California, Alaska, Washington, Hawaii, Florida, Virginia, New Hampshire, Michigan, and Minnesota. And every single place has their pros and cons and cultures. And a lot of stereotypes generally are not wrong. They're just maybe a little extreme. Like when people say a certain stereotype at a certain place, maybe it's not entirely true, but there's some grain of truth to it, right? And so I would 100% agree with you. Yeah, it's the West Coast in general is kind of fast paced, and I think people just yeah kind of go about their lives, and then did. What's funny is I talk to people here having moved back from we lived in Hawaii before this, and everybody from Hawaii is either grew up there or they're from somewhere else. And so if you aren't open to like talking to people there and making friends, no one would have friends. And so it's extremely easy to find to make friends in Hawaii. On the inverse of that, moving back here, you really have to go out of your way. And I had the funniest moment. I was in my brother and sister-in-law's neighborhood, and this woman walked by, and then her husband he was talking to someone else, but he came up next to her quickly, and I'm like, this is literally how bad it is. I had come from a place where everybody was talking to everybody, so I wanted that to be the case here. And so my mind went like this. I went, those are young people. I should go talk to those young people, like a young couple that's our age. And so I walked up to them, and then I realized I had nothing to say to them. I just like wanted to be friends. And so that is very atypical of this area. And I would agree with you that you really have to go to a church and make friends at church, find something in common, like dog lovers, pet lovers. Maybe you're a hiker and you join hiking groups. One of the things that I found the easiest to do is meetup groups. If you're into ultimate frisbee, go do an ultimate frisbee group, a snowshoeing group. There's a bunch of them, and it's a really good way to meet people. And people are nice, by the way. That's one thing. Like they are. It would be very rare that someone would even be mean so much as just maybe ignore you if they're not interested in having conversation. Speaking of the rain as well, I wanted to mention, so Western Washington is rainy. That's like the stereotype, and that's totally true. So Black Diamond has 173 days of rain. The average in the US is 106. So that's 144 sunny days in Black Diamond, 205 on average in the US. And so just to hit you with the stats there, if you go over the mountains east in Eastern Washington, that can drop down to like as low as 30 days of rain in a year. So something to bear in mind, that there's a place for everybody. I don't want people to be too afraid, but it is very true. And not to turn this into a dark podcast, but Washington State, from what I remember reading somewhat recently, has the highest rates of suicide, and it has a lot to do with the weather. So something to bear in mind there.
But Austin, I will say there is a reason why you and I choose to live in Washington, because even though it is cloudy and rainy and people can be very introverted, it's just a really cool place. If you like the outdoors, it's like, I think it's probably the best place in the country. Food scene is pretty good. Coffee is king here. A lot of breweries. And to your point, yeah, people are nice. They might not just come up and strike up a conversation with you, but I can
Mhm.
guarantee you, if you're willing to put in the work, you will make friends for a lifetime.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And even with the weather, it's so temperate here, even though it rains, it can't be too cold because that rain would be snow. So there's actually a lot you can do year round. You just wear a rain jacket. And so that's one thing I've learned being back here is, you know, you just need to commit to getting outside. So let's talk about investing in Black Diamond. So I'll hit you with kind of a statistical angle and then a more human angle, I guess. So 20.24% population growth, again, that's crazy. Top 10 fastest growing town in the whole nation. You can't deny that. But that is very one-sided in terms of that population is, of course, like people who are moving and living in houses, and it's not tourism oriented. So due to home price affordability, places like Black Diamond I think will continue to boom as employees from Seattle area look for homes with more property and a better price compared to what they can buy near Seattle. And I just want to say a quick anecdote because I have family that live up in that area. These small towns, they don't have land left. So there are towns that you would think, well, why don't you just move to this town that's closer to Seattle? And the reason is they don't exist. Like the towns exist, but there is no land. Developers are paying almost $1 million per plot for a quarter-acre plot to put one or two houses on. It's extremely hard. And so that is why Black Diamond is really growing and is enticing in that regard, is because there's just such a supply limitation compared to the demand. And Black Diamond really has a prime location near Mount Rainier for both the summer and winter tourism, which I think provides a unique opportunity for short-term rentals or even a bed and breakfast in the area. It looks like it needs it. I mean, I'm looking for places to stay, and if unless you're wanting to stay in Maple Valley or somewhere else in that area, you just can't. And those places get booked up. I mean, we'll go, Hunter, you and I have gone to hikes around there, and the parking lots of these trails, there's no. I remember one hike you and I went on. There was like a mile of cars down the road parked trying to get to the trail, and I saw a bunch of cranky kids. I'm like, why are these kids so cranky? They just started hiking. I'm like, oh no, they didn't. They just hiked a mile up a gravel road to get here. So yeah, in terms of the opportunities with a real estate perspective, I would say flipping houses, buying new construction homes, selling them, renting them, that's always an option because I think there's a lot of demand in that regard. But short-term rentals could be an opportunity there. The one thing to bear in mind is your spring and fall are going to be pretty. It's very bipolar in terms of the summer and winter seasons. And when we were discussing other places that were booming, this is a very different thing because again, it's all residential. So I think the business opportunities that exist there have a lot to do with services for the residents. So the coffee shops, that makes a lot of sense because you get the drive-through traffic during the tourism season, plus all the locals, they need their coffee fix in the morning as well before their 1.5 hour commute to their office. So that makes total sense. Also, electricians, plumbers. I know every single episode I talk about that, but I know what their prices are. I've been trying to get some to help out at my house, and they could charge infinite amounts of money because they're booked for like a year out. So I think there's huge opportunity there. And the final thing I want to note is I think Black Diamond will just naturally continue to grow as long as the companies in the Seattle area continue to grow. But in an economic slowdown, Facebook just said that they're cutting a bunch of jobs. Amazon cut 100,000. Microsoft said that they're doing a hiring freeze. This growth of Black Diamond is entirely dependent on people having jobs in there near the area. And so if that economic slowdown, which I don't think will last particularly long, but even if it lasts 6 months to a year, I could see the statistics of Black Diamond actually slowing quite aggressively. So, for example, I looked at the housing market data in Black Diamond, and the average amount of days that a house was on the market last year was 4. The average right now is 36. It's, these things come in waves, but I don't think demand for houses in Black Diamond will be going away drastically anytime soon. Any thoughts on that investing, Hunter?
Yeah, I think you kind of alluded to the fact that as all these new people are coming in, having simple things like a hotel or a grocery store, things that you wouldn't think of as like, oh, what a great investment opportunity. But the fact is, they don't have that. So that could be a really good opportunity.
Totally. Well, let's hit us with some reviews here, Hunter. I know you have some reviews ready for us.
Yeah. So the first review here says, small town living with larger cities nearby. Development is bringing home values up. Only downside is the city doesn't have room to widen roads. Most major roads through town are one lane each way. Rush hour is busy. And yeah, we talked about Austin. There is like that one main road through town. And if it's Saturday morning and people are heading up to Mount Rainier, it's going to be slammed. So I would imagine that they would probably do something regarding the infrastructure of the roads if that continues. Any thoughts on that before
Yeah,
I
one
move on?
comment. Yeah, one comment on that. I lived in a part of Washington in Southwest Washington that had the only way to get to it was a road going north and south or east and west. And there was this road that went east to west, and the freeway was west. And the only way to get to the freeway was a 1 lane, or I guess 2 lane road, 1 lane each direction. And no joke, if you left at the wrong time, it was probably 3 miles of driving and you would be there for 45 minutes. It was that drastic. And what I learned about that is that's a that's a problem that doesn't get better, by the way. As the place grows, it only gets worse. So, to solve that problem, the city has the right for any business or residence near a main thoroughway, I forget what they call it. Thoroughway, I think it's called. Basically a road. They have the right to tear down any structures that they need for road improvements. That's a legal thing. Every town, every city has that. And so you could have a mansion that you paid $20 million for and they could tear it down. Now, legally, they have to offer you what is fair value. But if you don't take the money, they just tear it down. So that actually happened in the place that I was living. There were a few restaurants that protested that. They didn't take the money. Those restaurants don't exist anymore. And that highway now has 4 lanes, not 2. And so just a quick side note on that I think with time, the town of Black Diamond will probably solve that problem.
Awesome. All right, let's jump into the second review. So this one is from someone who used to live in Black Diamond and moved away. I would live here again in a heartbeat. The small town atmosphere is great and you always feel safe. It is away from the busy city and close to the mountains, hiking trails, camping, and we still have deer and elk that can be seen in people's yards and nearby. House prices are surprisingly high for such a long commute, but I would take that commute over not having any backyard. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about. Like, if you live in Seattle, you're not going to have a yard. You might not even have a house. I would imagine a lot of people in Seattle are probably in like a condo or an apartment. So if you wanted to continue working in Seattle and you don't mind a long commute, I think Black Diamond would make sense because it is fairly rural, even still, even with the suburbs catching up. So you could kind of have that duality of both worlds where like I live in the city, or excuse me, I work in the city, the fast paced Seattle life, but I come home to my little farmhouse with my garden in the backyard, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, and I know for myself, I would take that option personally because I need those feet. I need my feet in that grass. So, in terms of the projected growth rate, as we promised, I did some math. And I project that Black Diamond is going to grow by 6.3% in 2023. But I do want to mention that I think it could hit 10% again relatively soon. Again, just to mention, it grew by 20% last year, but that's exceptional. And I do think with the economic situation as it is, housing starts have slowed down, home sales are slowing down and decelerating. So the population growth will naturally just kind of slow during that period. So 2023 will still 6.3% would put it into the top 100 fastest growing towns in the nation anyway. And there is one dynamic that you just cannot stop with Black Diamond, which is if Amazon keeps getting bigger, if Microsoft, Facebook, Boeing keep getting bigger, those people have to live somewhere. And if those people have to live somewhere and they can't afford $1 million apartment or a $2 million home in the suburbs, they move to Black Diamond. I'm just generalizing there. But that forced out nature of things will continue to occur in the suburbs around big cities. So Hunter, let me ask you, would you visit, move, or invest in Black Diamond?
Austin, I think this is the first time I'm going to say this on Boomtowns. I would have absolutely no reason to visit Black Diamond. I mean, there's just nothing there. Absolutely nothing. So yeah, I'll move along. Would I move to Black Diamond? Yes. I think moving there makes way more sense if you, well, I was going to say if you had a family, even if you didn't have a family, if you were just single and you worked in Seattle and you were commuting, or maybe you just wanted to live in the greater Seattle area because you love the Pacific Northwest, I think Black Diamond makes a lot of sense. And if you have a family, you're raising kids, I think it's a great place. It's family friendly. The schools aren't bad. So it just makes sense that it would be a great place to move. Would I invest there? Yeah. And kind of going back to what I said, I would invest there. But it would be simple investments like a grocery store or a gas station or a hotel, things that are just basic amenities that I think any growing town should have. Now, Austin, I'll ask you, would you visit, move, or invest in Black Diamond?
Yeah, so I would visit the area of Black Diamond, being that it's around beautiful hikes, rivers, lakes, Mount Rainier, which is just a picturesque mountain. If you haven't, anybody listening to this, if you haven't seen Mount Rainier, Google it. It's like the mountain picture that you think of. It's beautiful. But since Black Diamond has nowhere for me to stay, I probably wouldn't visit there. If they had somewhere to stay, I would stay there just as much as I would somewhere else in the area, but it's definitely not on my tourism list in that regard. Would I move there? So the thing, I want to answer this specifically because I think it's a super valid question for people that are thinking about this same question in an area where they live, whether it be near another big city, Austin, Texas, Portland, Oregon, Miami, Florida. This sprawl thing is happening in all the high demand places. And so the question from an affordability perspective that people think about is, okay, I want to have grass. I want to have a backyard, a garden. I want to have rooms for my kids. Like, what can I do? Do I move states? That's a huge thing because maybe my family doesn't live in the area. No, maybe what I do is I just move further and further and further out from my job. And that's what I think a lot of people are facing with that. That's why people are putting up with an hour and a half or 2 hour commute. And for me, when you think about the percentage of your life spent in a car with a 2 hour commute, I can't figure out how to justify that in my mind. Yeah, maybe the money's good, but you don't get that life back. So that's just my personal perspective. So no, I wouldn't move there if I worked in the Seattle area. If I worked remotely, I would consider it just because I love the hiking and outdoor activities as well. So I think that's really the perspective that I would go out with Black Diamond personally. But I can totally see someone who needs to work in a place because they've been working at this company for a long time and they want more space. Black Diamond is one of the few solutions left. And so I can totally respect people doing that. Would I invest in Black Diamond? My answer to that question is probably not, just because there's probably places you could invest in that will net you a higher profit. The demographics in that area being so one-sided toward residential, and the fact that there's only so much land left to develop, I worry that the opportunity is somewhat limited there. And so I think there are other places that we've talked about that have massive tourism plus massive population growth, plus maybe they're 2 hours from a major airport or something, that my money could go a little bit further in as well. Thanks so much for listening to Boomtowns. This was the last week that we are exploring the fastest growing places in the Pacific Northwest.
And we just wanted to thank everyone who has been listening for listening and let you know this has been super fun for us. We've had a great time talking about these awesome places. However, we did want to let you know that we are going to be taking a break from Boomtowns.
Yeah. Thank you again for listening. And we just basically are reflecting on, hey, this is a fun idea. Fastest growing places in America. But as life does, we've had discussions about the lifestyle of it and want to be able to provide as much value for you as possible. So we may be back. We're not sure yet. But if we are, you'll be the first to know. So until next time, Boomtowns out.
Boomtowns.